This is Richard Wolff responding to an AskProfWolff question sent in by Edgar Nelson of our Patreon community. Edgar asks about the food industry, particularly about perishable food that has to carry by law a little notification, sell by a certain date or use by a certain date. And that is to prevent what used to happen in the food industry when the search for profit by food-producing capitalists led them to keep food on the shelf that we would buy, even beyond the date when it was safe to eat, producing illnesses, in some cases death, and needing therefore to be regulated. The government coming in to offset one of the very negative consequences of a food structure, a food industry driven by profit. Edgar asks a related question. He notices that millions, billions of dollars worth of food are destroyed every year, wasted literally, by corporations who have to throw it away because it is older than the use by or sell by date. He does note correctly that some of the food just before it goes out of date can be donated by corporations. And that's correct. They can give it to charities, they can give it to churches, they can distribute it in food banks and so on. And some of that is done. But there are two things to notice about that kind of donation that show that it is a kind of horror, just like wasting the food is horror. Here are the two reasons. Number one, when a corporation that produces food gives some of it to a charity, hopefully before the expiring date, they are allowed to deduct the value of that donation from their income tax. So yes, you're helping hungry people, but you're starving the government of revenue that it needs to do everything for everybody, including poor people. So there's a kind of bizarre offset there. More dark, if you like, is the phenomena of taking food that is so close to the expiry date, or even sometimes beyond it, giving that away, taking a tax deduction, which you're technically not supposed to do, and then having the charity, not wanting to offend the donor, take that stuff and feed it to poor people or to church-going, needy people, which then means that food that is unsafe for those who can afford it is being ingested by those who are poor, and I don't know of too many moralities or ethics that would allow that, or certainly not justify it. So what's the problem here? Edgar asks, what might be a Marxian criticism or alternative here? Well, the first thing to understand is that private profit shouldn't be the determinant of what happens. A rational food system, not one driven by private profit for the food producer, but one driven by the needs of the population first and foremost, and then the profit and the viability of the enterprise can be considered, but it's not the determinant. Feeding people isn't the last step in the process, it should be the first. Let me give you an example. A rational food system would figure out what do we need to give everybody a decent diet, so we don't have the tens of millions of people in the United States today who are considered to be, and this is the new phrase, food insecure. That's right, they're hungry. A lot of Americans are hungry all the time, particularly old people and children. So what would a rational system be? Well, you start with what the priority is. Feeding every citizen, every person in our community should not have to worry where their next meal is coming from. They should have a nutritious, healthful diet. That should be the beginning. And you organize the production of food to meet that end. If it's not safe,